Hello, hello, hello to Friday Eve, aka Thursday. Today, super short, we're talking about the midpoint, okay? So the midpoint of a segment is always right in the middle of the segment, okay? So if M is right in the middle of A and B, what does that mean? That means that this would be equal to this, right? Because if M is right in the middle, it cuts it in half. So AM is congruent, we know congruent, to MB, right? Congruent, which really means equal, okay? So if we suppose that M is the midpoint of PQ, I've got PQ, got to draw it out, and I've got M in the middle. Now, in geometry, I like to label everything as much as I can. So since I know my given is that M is the midpoint, I know that PM is equal to MQ. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dash it out so I just know, so I never forget that those are supposed to be equal to each other. And now I know that PM is 6x plus 8, and MQ is 4x plus 20. Okay, so we can't do the segment addition postulate to solve for x, right? Because we can't do part plus part equals whole because we don't know what the whole should equal to. But since I know M is the midpoint, I know that PM is equal or congruent to MQ, right? The two sides should be equal to each other because M is cutting it in half. And PM, I know, is 6x plus 8, right? Because it tells me right here. And I know MQ is 4x plus 20. So I can set them equal to each other. So whenever we have a midpoint problem, we want to set the equations equal to each other. So now it just becomes a pretty simple algebraic expression. I do minus 4x, 2x plus 8 equals 20, minus 8, 2x equals 12, divide by 2, x equals 6. And now I just got to make sure, was that what it was asking me to do? Was it asking me to find x? No. It's saying, what is the length of PQ? So now that I have my x, I got to plug it back into one of these to find out how long PQ is. So I'm going to pick the first one, PM. So I'm going to plug in 6 for x. So 6 times, I'm plugging in my x, this guy, boop, plus 8. So 6 times 6 is 36, plus 8. This is what PM equals. $44. Okay, so now I know what one half of it is. But if they're both equal to each other and they're just cut in half, how long should MQ be? 44. So how long is the whole thing, PQ? 88. Amazing. All right. So now we've got our midpoint formula, which I think is easier than the distance formula. And, well, you can be the judge of that, I guess. So like I was doing with the distance formula, first I'm going to write down the actual math equation, but then I'm going to Miss Kowalski simplify it so that you can keep it memorized. So the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and it's that parentheses with a comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. Okay, so it's really trying to get me to find the midpoint, so just a coordinate point. So that's why it looks the way it does. And if you notice, it wants to take the average of the x's. Okay, so to take the average of the x values, I add the x values and divide by 2. To take the average of the y's, I take the y coordinates, add them together, and divide by 2. So if we wanted to simplify it, so we don't have to remember what x1, x2, blah, 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 all that jazz, I can say add x coordinates and divide by 2. Okay, so that's how I get my x coordinate for my midpoint. And then to get my y coordinate for my midpoint, I do add y coordinate and divide by 2. Because I showed this yesterday, if I'm trying to find the number right in between 4 and 6, I mean, obviously it's 5, but if I added them together, 4 plus 6, and divided by 2, that would be 10 divided by 2, 5. So I know right in between here is 5. So that's what I'm doing, okay? But with 2 points. So here, I've got my x values for these points. I want to find the midpoint between these 2 points. My x values, my x coordinates are -1 and 6. So I'm going to plug that into my equation. I'm going to add them together. -1 plus 6 divided by 2. Okay, so that's how I'm going to get my x coordinate. And then I'm going to do the y's. 8 and 14, add those together. And divide by 2. So then if I simplify this, -1 plus 6 is 5 over 2. 8 plus 14 adds 22 divided by 2. And now, I think it's easier to graph decimals. So for now, let's say that we can use decimals. So 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. And 22 divided by 2 is 11. So my midpoint between these 2 points, if I were to graph them, graph all these points, my midpoint would be 2.5, 11 on the coordinate point. All right? On the coordinate graph, plane, whatever. All right, that shouldn't be too bad. If you have questions, let me know. This one is a little tricky, a little different. So it starts out the same. Suppose X is the midpoint of PL. So let's draw it. I've got P, I've got L. I know X is right in the middle, and I know that these should be equal. Okay, I know the coordinate point for X is, let's color code. I don't know if that helps you guys, but I know it would help me. So X is 2, -4, which is the midpoint. So we know the midpoint. So in this case, we're not trying to find the midpoint. And then we know that point P is 6, -8. And I want to find point L. Okay, so we got to do something different. Still using the midpoint formula. That's my hint. But not in the way that we just did before. So let's think about it. Technically, L, okay, is a point value, or is a coordinate point. So I know that L should be some type of XY, right? Just because that's how we graph things. It should be XY. So what if, since I know what it should be equal to, I work backwards. So if I have my midpoint formula, and I know I'm adding my x's together. So in this case, my x values of my 2 endpoints are 6 plus x right? Because those are my x values. Taking them from here, they always have to be the endpoint, divided by 2. But I know that that should be equal to 2, because that's my midpoint. Okay? And then I do the same thing on the other side. I add my y values. -8 plus, gotta move this over, my y divided by 2, and I know that that should be -4. And now I can just solve for each variable. So let's see. So I can cancel out this 2. I got to multiply. Remember, we did that like the first day of our Zoom. So then this becomes 6 plus x equals 4. 2 times 2. Then here I'm going to do the same thing. Multiply by 2. That cancels out. Multiply by 2. So this is -8 plus y equals -8. Right? Oh, interesting. Yep. Okay. Then I'm going to subtract by 6 to get x by itself. So x is equal to -2. And I'm going to add 8 to both sides. That cancels out. So y is 0. So I know that my coordinate points for L is -2, 0. And that is it, my friends. That's how you solve it if you're trying to find the midpoint, and how you solve it if you're trying to find an endpoint. In this case, we're trying to find L, the endpoint L. If you have questions, if you want to see me do another problem, let me know. If not, you've got your practice. You've got the time. You got this. I believe in you. And I'll see you tomorrow.